Hi, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith.
Welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith. We hope you're having a great week so far.
Yes.
And I'm here with Pastor Seth, and we are, in the third Sunday of Lent?
Third Sunday of Lent.
Already. We were just talking about how it seemed like yesterday we were in the season of Advent.
Yes, absolutely. I think some of the stuff that I put out for this episode, I think I put Advent. Well, and they rhyme, you know what I'm saying? So they rhyme, but they just come so fast.
It does. I mean, I'm just kind of, my head's spinning. Well, I think, too, I'm taking these classes at Trevecca, and, they're supposed to be 6 weeks long. And when I took my books back to the post office last week, I thought, it seems like I was just here.
Yeah.
I was just here returning last class books.
That's right.
Thank goodness. But yeah, I mean, weeks really do fly by.
They really do. So you got a busy week ahead of you.
As always, we say this every time. Yes, I am excited that I will be speaking at a ladies' retreat this weekend. Gainesville Church of the Nazarene is having a ladies' retreat with probably about 25 of their ladies. They're just going to do a little getaway in Atlanta, and so I'm excited about that. I'll be speaking and leading worship and fellowshipping and all those good things, and I'm excited.
Well, that's easy, like doing worship and preaching. No, it's going to be good.
Well, no, it's going to be low key, and it'll just be things that we know, and so I'm really looking forward to it. And I have some other good news.
Yeah,
I have a song that is being released to radio
today.
Hopefully, yes. It's not me singing; it's a group called Promised Land Quartet.
Yeah,
and we talked about the song "Back in the Grave," probably back in the fall, because they recorded the end of last summer. But anyway, it's great timing for this song to be released to radio, because it's talking about how we could never put Jesus back in the grave. And during the Lent season, we know we're going to have the Easter celebration. It's a great time for a song like that. So just pray that it does well, that message gets out to a lot of people and hits the airwaves, and just settles into the hearts of people. That's my prayer.
That's awesome. So good things happening for sure.
Yes.
And be praying for you this weekend. And
thank you.
I've never done a retreat or had to speak kind of multiple. I take that back. I guess I have done a youth kind of retreat, but I think I've only had to speak twice. I haven't had to do more than that. So you're going to be doing 4 times?
3 times.
3 times.
The first night we'll be having more of a game and fellowship and that kind of thing. And then I'll be speaking Saturday morning and Saturday night and Sunday morning. And, I'm still feeling like, it's been a year since I really started honing in on preaching. And I always have so much information, and it's so hard to part with it, because it's well, if I don't talk about this, it's not going to make sense. And so I really have a hard time trying to fine tune and cut out or, just eliminate things that are not necessary. I think everything is necessary. So this way, getting to speak 3 times, I'm using the same passage. And so I'm just going to draw things out and, add other passages that support that. But it's going to be nice to have 3 sessions to get it all out of my system.
That's awesome. So, well, very good. I'm excited to hear a report back on how that goes. And sure, it's going to be fantastic. Yes. And so we are in the season of Lent, and we had a great conversation last week, and hopefully you enjoyed that. And I think this week's going to be good. This week it's pretty interesting because last week we really hit on the Genesis passage and talking about Abraham, talking about faith, and then the Romans passage was really about this, where Paul is reiterating that faith is so important, and we can't live by the law because the law essentially breeds death, right? It breeds destruction. And I think we said this last week. If not, we should have said this. It's not saying that the law is bad. I think sometimes it's easy to be on the all law side, to say, no, we've got to follow the rules and we got to do this. And sometimes it's easy to be on the all faith side, and the law means nothing. And I don't think that that's the reality of how we should approach our faith, to approach our walk. I think we're doing the Bible a disservice when we do that, right? Because a lot of the Old Testament, it does boil down to this law. Right. And so if we just do away with it, and I think a lot of people do this, they'll say that the Old Testament doesn't matter. Well, don't tell me that, because I am an Old Testament guy. I love, love, love the Old Testament. And I think it serves a great value to us if we will allow it to. And I think it's going to be a fun conversation today, because maybe we get to explore that just a little bit.
Right. I've enjoyed our Sunday school class. Shout out to Randy, my Sunday school teacher. It's so nice to be in Sunday school, but we've been going through an N.T. Wright book. And Randy asked us a couple of weeks ago, are rules necessary? Do we need rules? And so we had to stop and think, and that was a question that N.T. Wright had proposed. And, do we need them? And the obvious question is yes, because rules keep us safe. That's what you tell kids when you're teaching school. The rules will help you keep safe. And so in that perspective, yes, we do need rules, because God, He made our bodies. He made all of us to coexist on this earth. And so He knew what He was doing when He wrote the Ten Commandments. But do we really need them if we have the Holy Spirit residing in our hearts? Do we need them, or does He just write them and it's like no-brainers? We know what's right because we have the Holy Spirit. But that was my answer at the end of the day. Yes, we still need to know what they are. So, we have a starting point, to work with. So the Holy Spirit can remind us. I think that's His job in our lives, is to remind us of the things that is spoken in the Word.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that can arise. Do we need rules? I think that's great. Obviously, starting question. And I think you're right. Obviously, I think, a town or a place or a government or a country without rules or laws it's not going to be a country probably
just
for very long.
Drive around.
Right? It's pretty bad. It can get pretty rough if everybody just kind of does what they do.
Right.
But I think there's this other reality is, even in like the US of A, where we have a lot of these freedoms, what we call, freedoms to be able to do the things we do. A lot of times we give up some of those freedoms, and we obey the laws so that we can have a common society, and we can, but the reality is there's a reason that we have a court system, right? Because the lawmakers can write a law, but someone has to determine how does that law really get interpreted.
Right.
And that's where the judges come into play, and that's why people sue each other. And so there can be a lot of discrepancies, and there can be a lot of things to where, hey, maybe you see a rule and a law different than actually I see the rule in the law. And so there always has to be potentially somebody that comes in. And I think that's where it gets really, really tricky. And I think that's where back in the day that, with Jesus, a lot of his struggle was with the Pharisees. And just traditionally, the Pharisees were very much about the law. We follow the law to the T. And like I said, not that that's maybe necessarily a bad thing, but it oftentimes created this big struggle, power struggle. But what the issue that often arises is when you are in power and you have the power, then you can begin to take rules and laws and turn them to your advantage. And I think that's where lots of times the issue really, really arises. And I think that's scary for the church, because it's easy for us in the church, us that have power, us that have the ability to interpret the law or interpret the rules, or say, this is, maybe even sometimes we say, this is the word of God. These are God's words, and this is how you should act, and this is what you should do. It can be a very, very, very dangerous thing when there's people who are over the rules or over the laws, just like in a government sense. There's people who are in power, if they're self-motivated and they're not truly thinking about the people that they're serving, then they can create laws that they may be good for them, but they're not beneficial for everybody.
When you were talking about the Pharisees, I was thinking about something I read just this morning in my Max Lucado Encouraging Word Bible. Put a plug in for that. I'm loving this Bible. But he said that we make the Pharisees out to be villains.
Right.
And in reality, if if they were living today, we would want them as our neighbors,
right.
because their yards would be perfect and they would live these great lives, and we would want them in our churches because they're going to be big financial supporters and good, upright people. But like you said, it's like, the people that are in power that can twist the laws to their advantage. That's where the problem is.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes into play. And I think as we have this conversation, hopefully we can, I don't know where we're going to end up, honestly.
Me either, but
it'll be fun to see where we might end up. And I think most people probably know today's passage, or passages. Probably passages that we're going to use. But it's the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
And what an awesome opportunity for all of us to rehear these commandments. And we didn't say who was going to read what before we started. So do you want to read the 10 Commandments? Do you want me to read them?
It doesn't matter.
You go ahead and do it.
Okay. Exodus 20:1-17. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. He knew that we would get creative with those, didn't he?
That's right.
You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or even the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Oh, yes. The 10, the Decalogue, or whatever you want to call them. And these were the 10, right? Like this is the 10 commandments that God gave to Moses, that Moses was going to give to the people. And that's where it started, right? It was just 10. Man, wouldn't it have been awesome if he would have been able to stop at that 10?
Right. And this is it. But, I just finised the book of Leviticus.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, they can do anything.
Yeah.
Everything makes you unclean.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, eventually this 10 will roll into, I can't remember how many there are. There's like 629 laws or something like that. Somebody can fact check me on that. Whatever the number is, it's a lot of laws. And it just makes me ponder, why the need for more, right? Like if God gave this list to Moses and said, you know what, this is it, this is the law, this is what's going to be, man, what potentially could have been the reality for the need for more? And obviously if you read the story, it's because the people wanted more. They wanted more. They had to have more. Like, as issues arose and as things happened, Moses would have to go to God and say, all right, God, what are we going to do about this? Or what are we going to do about this? And essentially it's the people that require the law. Whereas I think God essentially in this passage was giving the people everything that they could ever really need to be able to live life to its fullest. But unfortunately the people didn't always get there.
Yeah, and the people didn't even want to hear these laws themselves.
Right.
He invited them, and they're like, "No, Moses, you go. You get the list from God, and then come back and tell us." They didn't. They were afraid when the mountain was smoking and the booming voice and all that. They were terrified,
Sure.
and they didn't want to hear the voice of God and to hear His requirements. So it had to come through another person.
All right, and what were they doing while Moses was up talking to God? They were making their own God.
And that blows my mind because the very things that they made that golden calf out of, they were the supplies that God literally put in their hands for them. They didn't have to fight. God told them to go to the Egyptians and tell them, like, hand over your jewelry, hand over your gold, give me this, give me that. And they did. They didn't protest. They just, like, get out of here, take it and go. So the very thing that God provided for them, they used it to make an idol. And I thought about that in this verse that talks about having no other idols. We take the things that He gives us and that are good things, and we turn those in to be our gods, our little g gods.
We do that to the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
This very thing that we're talking about. We do that with rules, right? Like the rules become our God. And the reason we want that is because if we know, yes, do this, don't do this, then it puts us in control. It allows us to be in control. And so if I just know, all right, I can do this. If I do this, then I'm going to be good. Everything's going to be taken care of. It's no longer about God moving and working in my life, but it is about me knowing, yes, I've as long as I do this, then everything is going to be taken care of. And I know I'm going to be taken care of. And I'm going to get to a place where I feel like I deserve to be and where I want to be. And so it's all about us being in control. And the more and more rules and laws that we put into place, then it becomes all that much more reality of us being able to control. And so the people wanting to have control, they continue to go to God, and God continues to give these rules to the people. Whereas, like I said, I believe that these 10 rules gives the people literally, or these 10 laws, everything they could ever need to understand the problem that all of us have been struggling with from the very, very beginning of time, is how do we allow God to be God, and how do we be His people? What does that look like? How do we live in the presence of a holy God? And this passage takes us to that place. Now, do I think it was God's intent? And I mean, you'd have to ask God this. Do I think it was God's intent for Him to create this list as a checklist for us to be able to say, you know what, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, so I am good? I don't believe that this is what this is about. And I think essentially, we'll talk about this probably here in a little bit, but when Jesus comes on the stage, He totally takes all these laws and He kind of turns them upside down on their head. But there is an essence to these laws. There's an essence to the 10 Commandments that if you just dig a little bit deeper into the realities of what God is telling the people and how God is telling the people to be able to live, and if we were to embrace the essence of the law, then that's where the good really begin. It's where it begins to really flow out of this. And I think, we'll talk about Paul probably a little bit more here in a little bit, but I think that's where Paul can say, if you are all about the law, like we talked about last week, if you're all about the law and you're about doing this, that is as good as death. It is oppression on such a deep level. And the law should not bring us to death, but the law can be something that can truly bring us to life if we allow it to be.
I keep thinking about the story of the rich young ruler.
Yeah.
When he comes to Jesus and says, how do I get eternal life, or whatever his exact question was. But, he tells Jesus to his face, like, yeah, I've done that. He's going through the list. I did this. I did that. I did this. I'm good to go. And Jesus is like, well, why don't you sell all of your possessions, give to the poor, then come back and see me. And it says that, of course he walks away, but Jesus was looking him with love written all over his face. He's looking at him with love. And we don't know the end of the story. It appears that he didn't come back because we don't hear from him anymore, but he did exactly what you're talking about. Yep. He's just checking off these list of rules. And when Jesus comes on the scene, like you said, there's an essence. There's an extension to these commands. Like, I think about the do not kill.
Right.
Well, I mean, we can kill people's spirits, and we can slay people's dreams, and we can murder people without getting a gun, and shooting people. And the same thing with like he says with adultery, that, you can have this lust and, you've already committed in your heart. So it's not just doing it, but it gets to the motivations of our heart. And he's about our hearts more than anything.
100%. Yeah. Jesus comes, and all of these laws that the Pharisees felt like they were living to the T, he just takes them and he pushes them just a little bit further, like you said, and he makes them a heart matter more so than do this, don't do this, because God cares about the heart. God cares about the heart, and so that's really what is so cool. And I think that's the reality of what God was trying to create here with his people. And you have the first couple of commandments, and a lot of people are like, well, all right, no other gods before me, no idols, right? So that's kind of our relationship with God. Like, we can't put anything in front of, first off, we can't really worship anything else, and we can't put anything else in front of our relationship with God. And like you said, that's so hard to do. It's hard to do on a very, very deep level. Lots of times we have idols that we may not even really realize that they're idols, things that we put in front of God. And I think so we've got to always have our eyes open. And then the other one, the next one is do not misuse the name of your Lord. And this one's a fun one because lots of people essentially, when I was growing up, it was don't curse, or don't say God. But I don't know. Is that what you grew up with as well?
Yeah, like, oh my God, or like saying the worst ever, and I still hate to hear it, is GD. But as I have matured in my faith, and as I've studied that a little more, it's so much deeper than just saying a curse word.
Very much so.
I mean, one aspect of it is like giving God credit when he didn't really do something. It's like a lot of times we can say, oh, that was of God, and you just have to be very careful of that, or saying something is not of God. And I know there's a lot of different faith traditions and a lot of different denominations that see things differently, and it's so easy to judge and say, oh, well, if they practice that, then that can't be of God.
Oh yeah.
And that's so serious. I feel like we're dancing all around that.
It's good.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think another way that people misuse the name of God is they'll tell someone something, and they'll say, hey, God told me to tell you this.
Oh, yes. I hate that.
You need to do this. And so they'll use God's name and put it as authoritarian, I guess, and some kind of authority. And they'll tell someone, you're supposed to do this. Now, we as pastors, we do this a lot. And that's why I think we've got to be very, very careful, very, very careful in our approach to pastoring and preaching and all of those type of things. But we just got to be very important in just our day-to-day life, because it's so easy for us sometimes to feel like we've got it all figured out because we know the rules. We know the rules. And so it's so easy for us to tell someone, you can't do that because God says don't do that. And that's where I think we've got to be very, very careful, because there's all kind of deep conversations we could have beyond this. Like, is what's right for you? I mean, is it always going to be? What's right for you may not be right for me, And I think Paul talks about that a lot. He says everything's permissible, but everything's not beneficial, right? Is it beneficial? Like, to eat food. And that's really what he's talking about a lot. But I think it's a broader scale. It's this reality of like, everything's permissible. But the question is what really is beneficial? Like, and I think that's where there's a hard discrepancy, because we want to be in control, and we want to be able to tell people, hey, God says don't do that, because there's something within us that we've created this mentality and this idea that it's our job to save people. And so we've got to tell people you're doing this wrong, when the reality is that's not the heart of the gospel and the reality of the gospel at all. And so it's just this vicious cycle that we continue to fall into. And these first three commandments, I think, are just so pivotal because I think so many times we are creating other gods, we are creating idols, and we are misusing the name of God, all in the name of God, which is a misuse of God, because we want to be right and we think we're right, and we think it's our job to tell everybody else that we're right.
And I'm thinking of the prophet Jeremiah, where I think it's Jeremiah, where God says these prophets are saying things that I said that I never said. Yeah. They're going places that I never sent them. And I think it's the same thing we see today. I mean, that's a scary thing.
Absolutely. It's a very, very scary thing.
Thus saith the Lord.
But then he doesn't stop there. Essentially, we moved to Sabbath, which is a very, very big deal. And Sabbath is something that in our day and age, in our culture, we don't really take very seriously on any deep level.
Right.
I try to take my family. We try our hardest to take it serious. My wife is very good, especially when I was a pastor. She was like, "Listen, I need a day a week, or you're not on the phone, you're not studying, you're not doing and those things aren't bad things. Like, I need a day a week. Your family needs a day of week where we can all just unplug and we can just be together as a family, and we can watch a movie or, do whatever, go to the park or do whatever, but we're going to do it together as a family where we truly take that opportunity to stop and just remember the reality that who God is, the fact that we serve a God who rested, and the benefits of rest for our body."
And I just keep thinking, we see this list of rules as a harsh thing, I think. But how gracious is a God that says, "I command you to take a break. I command you to take a nap. I command you," because, he knows, he's the one that created our bodies. He knows we can only go and go and go so much. Yep. And I really, all the rest of these, so, the gods of the day, I guess you can say, you just had to do so much for them to win their approval. And this is his list. What other God thinks about elderly people, about honoring your father and mother? How sweet is that? Yep. That is such a good thing. And he knows just and when you see Jesus, I think you get the heart, and, when Jesus is talking about, because he knows how, like the committing adultery, and he knows how devastating that is to everyone that's involved. And he knows how devastating a murder. I've not had any experience in my family, and I pray to God that never happens. Yeah. But, he just knows how devastating and how hurtful it is to go through these other things. So these are not rules that are unreasonable. And I think sometimes people think God is so harsh and, he expects so much. But these rules, even in the Old Testament, he was bringing them in their culture. He was bringing them up a notch from where they were. Yep. Even when you get into the Leviticus stuff and you start reading about slaves, and it makes me cringe. But you had, according to God, you had to treat the slaves on a different level of kindness than the world, in their culture of that day. So he's not harsh. He's not unreasonable. And he's actually gracious. And he's just trying to help us, teach us to care for one another.
On a deep level, on such a deep level. And then that's the reality of the rest of the commandments, is how do we treat each other? What does it look like for us? So, this is how we treat our relationship with God. This is how we make sure that we are rested ourselves. How do we treat ourselves? How do we treat our elderly? And how do we treat each other? Like, how do we interact with each other? And like I said, you can take this list and say, okay, well, I can check off all of these lists. Or you can say, no, there's something deeper that is going on. There's an essence to this that, yes, we want to make sure that we don't murder. We want to make sure we don't commit adultery, but it is, how do we treat people just in general? And how do we make sure that we are treating people equally? And that's what a lot of the New Testament talks about, is that reality is we're all equal and we're all on the same playing field. And this is just so counterintuitive, like you were talking about. It's a step above. It's the way of the world. It's so counterintuitive to the way of the world, and it's so easy for us to get sucked into the way of the world instead of realizing that maybe there's something different. There's this essence to the law that maybe it truly is about the heart as Jesus comes along. And then we're not going to read the 1 Corinthians passage because we don't have a ton of time left, but that's okay. We'll just go till we're done. But it talks about that reality that like the way of the cross, this is the way of the cross. It's foolishness to the world. This is foolishness to the world. The 10 Commandments is foolishness to the world. They see and they hear, and it just doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't make sense to stop. It doesn't make sense to not worship all of these gods. It doesn't make sense not to have idols, to try to appease these gods. It doesn't make sense to treat people in a way that honors their humanity. Yeah, like honors their humanity, you know, like, and so, this is just so different. And the passages really point, I think, at this reality that the way of Jesus, the way of the kingdom is different. And it started way back when.
And it still applies today. That's crazy. I was just thinking as I was looking at this list too, the world, our culture today, our idols are mostly just worshiping ourselves and what we want. And that is such a message that we hear all the time on billboards and commercials, social media. You deserve this, you are worth more, and it just puts such a place on ourselves. And we break all of these 10 Commandments, usually just trying to keep ourselves in the middle of our throne, on top of our throne. We'll steal. Yep. We'll take people's credit, or we'll slander somebody's character just to get ahead. I mean, you see it in the workplace where people are just elbowing and clawing and digging their way to the top because they deserve it, And
we'll lie. We'll do all those. We'll do whatever we got to do.
Yes, do what you got to do to get to the top. And my goodness, something that was written so long ago, if it was the heart of it was actually applied today, how different would it be in the workplace, in the neighborhood, in our families?
It's 100% right. Yeah, on a deep, deep level. And I'm so thankful that Jesus comes and he simplifies this all down for us, right?
Yep.
All the law and the commandments can be summed up into two things.
Love God.
Love God and love others. And it's such a beautiful reality, but it all points back to really that this is, I think, what God was essentially trying to create. He was not trying to create a list that we would try to fight to get hung on the wall, because just to hang it on the wall, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
If you're not living it, doesn't matter.
Right.
You can hang it in the wall all you want. It's not going to make a difference if you're not really living the essence of what God's desire really was. And so maybe what we pick up this time is that reality of how do we pick up the essence of the law and live the essence of the law.
That's so good. My mom was just drifting, how we will kill each other just so we can hang kill each other's reputations and just slander and drag each other through the mud, all for the sake of putting the 10 Commandments on the law. That's good.
I mean,
that's sad.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It really, really is, because I think it goes against the very commandments and essence of the law and the commandments themselves that God gave us, gave his people, and he gave us. So,
it's a lot to think about.
There is a lot to think about, and we could have gone on and on and on and on, but we do want to make sure that we do take care of everybody's time and respect everyone's time. But we do appreciate you guys listening in, and we're journeying towards the cross. It's going to be here before we know it.
I know. The weeks are flying by.
They surely are.
But thank you for walking with us and for listening, and we would love to hear from you. We do have an email address if you would like to send us an email. It's growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
Yeah, you can reach us on Facebook at Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast.
We'd love to hear from you. Until then, grace and peace.
God bless and bye-bye.